Welcome, everybody to the March 3rd, 2025 Heritage Advisory Committee meeting. Call this meeting to order at 1:05 p.m. Please note that the meeting is video and audio recorded, and all electronic meetings are uploaded to the municipality's YouTube page. By registering to participate in the meeting by electronic means, you are consenting to have your likeness and comments recorded and posted on YouTube. I will now read the township's land acknowledgement statement. The lands we know today as the Township of Puslinch have been home to Indigenous peoples since time immemorial. We acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Hattawandurung, as well as the treaty lands and traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee. With increasing encroachment by non-Indigenous settlers in the Township of Puslinch, the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee could not continue their traditional lifestyle and settled in their villages along the Credit River and in the Grand River Valley. These Indigenous nations uphold their treaty rights within our jurisdiction. Today, the Township of Puslinch remains home to Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We are grateful to have the opportunity to share and respect Mother Earth and are committed to building constructive and cooperative relationships with Indigenous nations. I will now do a roll call of those in attendance. We'll start with committee members and then we'll do staff in attendance here. So starting, I guess I'll start on my right this time. So Cheryl?
Here.
Thank you. Andy?
Here.
Russell's present. Neely?
Here.
And Christine.
Right here.
Wonderful. And also staff we have present. So we've got on my far right, Sarah.
Here.
And to my near right, Laura.
You remember my name this
I
time.
wrote it down.
You remember my name.
No brain cramps here.
Through you, Mr. Chair, Justine is joining us.
Oh, is she?
She is
Okay.
here virtually, yeah.
And online we've got Justine. So
Yes,
welcome everybody.
here.
Thanks, Justine. Thank you for pointing that out. I've been looking at that and I
You didn't see your name?
No.
For her picture.
Yeah, I'm visual, so, all good. So we'll now take a moment of reflection. Please pause for a moment. Okay, thank you. To item number 4 in today's agenda, which is confirmation of the agenda. Does anybody have any amendments they would like to make to the agenda before we turn it over to Laura? Okay, hearing none, over to you.
The Heritage Advisory Committee approves the March 3rd agenda as circulated.
We have a mover.
Seconder. Can Laura not move that? No. Okay.
We got first, who wants number 2? Andy, all right. All in support? Carried. All right, item number 5, disclosure of conflict of interest. Are there any conflicts of interest that have been identified based on the agenda today?
No.
Bureaucratic light today, so we appreciate that. So I guess that's good. Number 6, I do not believe we have any delegations today unless we have one from Centennial High School that you'd like to make. All right, we'll move on to item number 7, the consent agenda. So we've got a couple items here in the agenda that had been previously circulated to the committee and posted on the township website. So the first one is item 7.1 as well as 7.2. Based on those agenda items, would anybody like to pull either of those items out for further discussion at all? Okay, hearing none. What do you, Laura?
The consent agenda items listed for the March 3rd Heritage Advisory Committee meeting be received for information.
We have a mover.
So moved.
Ian, seconder, Cheryl. All in support? All right, carried. Next one, the good stuff. Committee reports. Item 8.1, report HER 2025-004, 2022 through 2026 goals and objectives update. we've seen this a couple times, but here's an update. I'll turn it over to Laura just to give us a high level walkthrough.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, this is the committee's goals and objective report that we see at each committee meeting. And it kind of goes over all of our active goals and objectives, and included in this one is a general designation update, as well as, an Excel, like the attachment to it is the committee's overall work plan. Remember at the last committee meeting, we talked about having all the ones that were completed, proposed, all in one Excel document, and that is attached at the end of the report.
Thanks, Laura. I know this was shared at the council meeting in a similar process previously, so I think I just appreciate the kind of completed, active, to be determined kind of future piece that you put into this. I think it's quite transparent, but any committee members have any questions on this, points of clarity you'd like to see?
It's great with all the stuff we've done.
I know. Busy. And then I guess the second piece to that is the conference that's in June of this year, if we know of any committee members that are interested in going. The sign up is not out yet. It will be out before we meet again next, obviously. But I do know that is similar to the conference last year. It is that second weekend in June, and this year it's in Prince Edward County. So, I mean, if you, it would be, it's a further drive. But if there is any committee members that know they're interested in that, I'm happy to register.
Did you go last year? Is that the one you went to?
I went 2 years ago. Cheryl and Sarah went last year. Russell, I went to London.
Yeah.
How long is it?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, it is like Thursday evening, Friday, Saturday. So it's like 2 days-ish. But I believe when you guys went to London, you only did the 1 day. I don't even know if that's an option.
I stayed over.
You did stay over? Okay,
Oh.
okay. I guess depending, you wouldn't be able to probably do it there and back because Prince Edward County is further.
Right.
It'd be a long day. if you drove
It's
there.
just the
Yeah.
Thursday night and the Friday.
Yeah,
I
it'd
think
be,
it was
it'd
Saturday.
be Belleville. It's maybe 2 questions for the committee members and
Mhm.
as well as you. I think I personally see value in having a committee member and the staff attend, because I think you take different things out of it. My observation, I think 2 years ago when Lily and I attended, I was amazed at the number of municipal staff consultants that participated, and I felt at the time it was a good opportunity for staff to network and build, especially within that heritage knowledge base, both peer to peer as well as seeking out any consultants that would be able to help shepherd designations in the future. So maybe a question for you, Laura, is it the recommendation from staff that we have 2 people go, 1 a committee member and 1 staff? Is that what we're thinking?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, I think it's up to the committee. If there is 2 committee members, I think that's totally fair. If there's 1 committee member, that's also fine. If there's no committee members, I mean, it is what it is. But the staff, for budgeting purposes, the staff is separate than the committee.
Right.
So they are 2 separate line items.
To go is, what's paid for? Like the conference, fee apparently?
Yeah,
There will
correct.
be a fee.
The fee is covered, and then there is, like, for the hotel, or if there's like a parking fee, that would also be covered.
Okay,
And then we do have budget for mileage,
okay.
so,
I think additional meals that they're not covered are also.
yeah, some of them are probably covered by the conference and some of them aren't. There isn't much about information up on the website yet. I keep periodically checking, hoping that there's,
When is it?
the third week of June, I believe it's. Even had it.
When you're in the June.
It is June 19th to 21st.
Oh,
So it's
That's
the third
weekend
weekend.
after Father's Day weekend.
Maybe that's why they did it that way, the way Father's Day falls this year.
I may be able to go.
Okay,
I'm not working that weekend, so it's possible.
Do we need to go back to council if we're able to send 2 committee members plus staff? Because we Originally, I recall it said 2 committee members could go and we were including 2 conferences. So now that
Mhm.
we're eliminating the other conference,
Mhm.
perhaps we can make sure that we have a proper budget to allow if 2 committee members are able to go.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't know if we need to go back to council. We have, in the professional development budget, there's $1,000. Last year, the fee per person with the early bird rate, because we signed up pretty quickly to when it opened, was $275. So of the $1,000 for professional development fee, the committee only used $275 last year.
Okay.
So there is room, and that was probably us also not knowing if we were gonna go to that national conference.
Right.
And then there was a budget included in that, but there is funds available,
So
should someone want to go. I'm assuming it'll probably be a little more than last year, but still not.
Let's say in that 300 range. So maybe just to follow up on your question, Christina. So the township does have a policy. We don't need to get into that today around attendance and mileage and meals and all that type of stuff. But at a high level, what would be covered would be the registration fees for the attendant, and mileage, a lot of meals. I think my experience, a lot of meals were included as part of the registration fee. And then hotels. So we can get into the here details offline, but that's at a high level, that's what's covered. Yeah, if I'm hearing you right, Laura, we could potentially send 2 committee members if there's interest, and then a staff attendee, which we highly recommend, I think collectively at this committee for reasons we previously spoke to. Could potentially, if there's a desire at the staff level to attend in addition to the committee members, that would be a separate budget.
Correct.
That's
Our
at
budget
the
is
staff
differently.
level to navigate.
Mhm.
Okay, so.
And-
Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I could also, like Christine, I could put your name down, and then once the stuff comes out to register, I can reach out to you confirming I needed, like, I wouldn't just register you without, like, we can go over the details, and then if you realize that you aren't interested, but at least then I have an idea of.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Others interested? Lily, Cheryl, Andy? Cheryl?
Yeah, I would be interested. I recognize that it's just gone to the last one, so if 2 others wanted to go, but I would be interested. I found it really valuable and partially because I was new, I guess, to everything, but because of the work that we're doing right now and just being able to share ideas and network amongst other was really valuable. So I think it's great that 2 people are able to go.
I'm interested, so how are calls, I could either Andy in interest? No,
Okay.
because Andy's never been.
So you put Lily's name.
Oh, I'm saying the other way. I don't, I know you're doing a lot of work on historical committees, Christian Society as well. So I think your involvement is a little deeper, so I'm fine standing up.
Well, of the 3 of us, hopefully 2 can go.
That's what I'm thinking, as
Yeah.
long as, and great. Because we're also a little further in the road than 2 years ago, I think we have kind of a better perspective of what we might be looking for from other townships.
And through you, Mr. Chair, depending on how we word the resolution, we don't have to put the 2 specific names. I could just say that we register 2, and then when information comes out, I can connect with the 3 of you. And we can decide, but at least if I know we have interest, I can keep it on my radar to keep looking at it, and then once I have any further information, I can reach out.
I like that. And depending on what the agenda looks like, maybe there's more interest or less interest. depending-
Yeah, but there's not even a program out or anything yet, so once we have that, we can.
And maybe one ad would be just to share the township mileage reimbursements and or food.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the expense policy.
That's what I'm looking for. Thank
Well,
you. Just so everybody's clear on that one. There's no misconceptions after the fact. But I think it's generally quite generous. Okay.
And then through you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair, I also wanted to share with the committee, it was just Laura had sent out the agenda on the 26th. Just wanted to share with everybody that that was the date, the appeal date for
Oh,
the
yeah.
2024 designation properties, and no appeals were received. So those properties that you worked on have proceeded through to be registered on title.
Wonderful. We're gonna tweet that out. Facebook or social media.
Since you brought it up, do we know how many have not gone forward? Just up and how many total have gone forward?
Of that batch in specifically,
That batch is fine. I know that's the
Yeah,
confusion
there
to
was-
us is it.
there was only two, through you, Mr. Chair, there's only two in that batch that didn't proceed. The concession one property and the Watson Road South property.
Okay.
I
I think that's it ever, isn't it?
correct, correct.
Yeah, because the Watson Road one is actually from the very first.
The
batch.
watch is from the 2023 batch that kept getting pushed.
Which concession one didn't go through?
It has, I think it was more. I didn't get any information because there wasn't much available from their property. It's a gated property, if I recall. I did look up the address and that was mine. I didn't get very far.
Mhm.
Yeah, if I can maybe share, they had provided a couple delegations to council. I think just my perspective was, there was very little original on that property. It was a hodgepodge of different additions or renovations over the course of time. And I think and the homeowner was a willing participant in the designation process. So a whole combination of that probably led it to be, no, it was not a unanimous decision to council. But ultimately the decision was to not register as a heritage property.
Now, Laura, I know that you had some feedback from at least one of those properties that was registered. I wondered if that's something you could raise here.
I can raise anything you want, maybe, maybe. Do you just mean, what do you mean?
Well, I mean, I am in a total conflict of interest.
Right.
Right, so I'm not sure what I can do about it, but I did raise, I don't own the land, but the concern was raised that addresses are designated, not buildings.
Yes. Right, well, and through you, Mr. Chair, I guess that just speaks to how when a property is designated, we can't, because it's registered on title, that's always gonna be the address itself, like 1 Main Street itself.
Right.
But the reason why there is that statement of cultural heritage value or interest is because that scopes the bylaw down to saying this schoolhouse on that property is what's designated and is, if you ever submit a building permit, we would look for those attributes in that schoolhouse before we would ever make you go to council to get a heritage permit waiver, a heritage alteration permit. It wouldn't, if you were to submit a building permit for another house on the property, that doesn't mean, how do I word it? You might need a heritage waiver, the permit waiver, but you would never, there's no reason why council would need to see you doing something to a different property. That's not the one that's in the statement of cultural heritage value or interest.
I think it's an important point for us when we're doing our work to
Mhm.
understand what we're designating is an address, not say a property with 15 buildings on it. It's the address and not the individual buildings that are being designated. I think we need to understand that when people object.
Yeah.
Can I interject there?
Yeah.
What you're saying, I'm not disagreeing with you, but what would be taken possibly to court is the actual items that are listed out. So each
Yeah.
property and each item does need to be, we need to be more clear. Of course, we are just
Yes.
making recommendations. It's council that have been staff that actually stand behind it, but
Mhm.
it's like when we say it's the mass building of 1.5 story with the coins and the lintels and the windows, and then the log cabin on the other side with the original glass, that sort of stuff has to be detailed out.
It does, because it's property, not buildings. And if we're not clear, I think, in the description, that's where it gets really mucky to me. So I think in order for us to do a good job and for us to be able to tell homeowners what's up, we have to clearly articulate this particular building on this particular place, and it has these characteristics. Because if there are multiple historic buildings on a property, it could get really mucky.
Add to that as well. So that I'm coming across a property where the house has been altered. so that you can't quite see the aspects that should be designated. However, that property also has something beyond just physical property designation to it, because it's who lived there and how that property, that house was like the first of that kind in Puslinch. So I'm actually, I'll bring it to council or to the group later to go over it, but I think there might be some reasons to designate something even if you can't see the house.
Historically significant. Justine, I think I saw you put your hand up, so.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
through you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to clarify with respect to including references to other buildings within the statement, and that there is value to including those references because it will speak to the contextual value potentially of the particular building that you are including heritage attributes to. So I would be careful just when drafting the statements to remove aspects that speak to that kind of broader context. But at the end of the day, as Laura mentioned, the attributes that are protected are at the bottom and they're in that list at the bottom section of the bylaw. So those are the attributes that staff are looking at in terms of protection. But in that broader statement, it is important to include kind of the context of the property. So it still might reference those other buildings, even though those buildings themselves may not be protected features.
Good point.
She words it so much better than I could ever imagine.
You know, and just while you were articulating that, Justine, I think I go back to the public engagement sessions that we've done over the last number of years, and I think that was something that had been articulated as part of the public engagement, and I think often, maybe that's not the right way to say it. Occasionally, depending on the circumstance, you know, if it's a house, one house on a property, it's pretty clean, right? If we have multiple buildings on one property, it gets a little murkier. So that's probably something, maybe two takeaways from my mindset is making sure that that's really well understood as part of, you know, future public engagement sessions. And I believe you worked through correct me if I'm wrong, I may not have the title correctly, but like an FAQ decision tree document when if you have a heritage designated property, when a waiver is required, when it's waived, whether an actual permit is required, and just to your point, Justine, the permit would be required when you're potentially altering those attributes specifically.
Right.
Anything else is up for staff to determine. So say I have a heritage property, XYZ 123 ABC Drive, and I'm building a detached garage. I get my building permit. It's a heritage designated property. That gets triggered because it's a heritage property, but a waiver would probably result because it's not impacting that particular building that is designated with the noted attributes, whatever those happen to be. Am I following that correctly?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct. And that was the purpose of kind of splitting those out. So when we receive a building permit, one of the steps is that that property goes through a zoning review. So at that point, we would identify that it's a heritage property. We would take a look at what is the permit for. If it's not impacting any of those listed attributes, then yes, a waiver would be the way that staff would go with that. And we would advise the property owner.
Okay, go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to, having spent some time with the Historical Society members, and they were originally part of this committee, and they go way back to when it was called LACAC, and they put the plaques up. What I'm hearing from them is that we will also want to look at the barns, I think, to make sure that we don't lose all of those in there. So for my fellow committee members, I just ask you to take a look at what they've recommended in the documentation you're looking at. And if it does say, look at the barn and it's in good shape, add that to the attributes. So don't lose them.
So this,
Your particular property is a little more unique.
well, I have another question then. If we designate addresses, which is the case, and we recognize there are multiple buildings, once one building is designated, can there be more designations on the site? If it's a barn, like would we even know if because I'm just thinking we have addresses that come here and we look at addresses, but if we've been sent, say, to look at a schoolhouse, but there's also a barn out back. So we designate the schoolhouse and the address and we check the box off and say it's done. But are we gonna lose the barn then, or will anything trigger that for us to go back to a property with multiple historic buildings on it, or is that, then it's done?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we could have information on file that we still know that this property has a barn that wasn't included in the designation. And I believe my understanding is that doesn't mean there's gonna be two cultural heritage value or interest statements. It would just, on a few of them you can see already, it's the one statement, and then there's the two separate bullet points of like schoolhouse, barn, and each with those bullet points. So it'd be the same statement, but I don't,
But if we didn't do it on the
Need to
first go
revisit.
round, it would be, then it's over and
Can
done.
we revisit a bylaw to add to it? if we
you can always amend, through you, Mr. Chair, you can amend a bylaw. And it would go through that same process. Now, maybe this is a question for Justine. Do we have to like state the notice again and everything?
Through you, Mr.
Yes.
Chair, yes, if there was going to be an amendment to the bylaw, we would have to go through this whole process again.
So the property owner would be notified, it's not,
Right, okay.
so on and so forth.
okay.
And there would be
But it would-
opportunities for objection and appeal.
Right, but how would we discover that? Like if any of the ones we've already done and designated and we went, like, if there are barns that people are concerned about, is there any way that we would even know about those?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we do have, in our heritage files, like a barns section that lists a bunch of the barns. I don't know if, I know when we started the designation process a couple of years ago, we were starting with just the houses itself and not the
Yeah.
barns. But should in the future, we just like, once we get through these and the committee decides to maybe look at the barns, that's definitely an option that we could go back and then go through those, but
Okay.
that's like a couple of years down the line,
Okay.
but that's always an option.
That sounds
Okay.
like we have a revisit.
Maybe two things here. I like not losing the idea of barns. Maybe my suggestion would be is similar to the work Lily and I will be engaging on in a historical district review,
Mhm.
like the pre-work for that. The reality is, I think this work will be in the next iteration of this committee after the next cycle of council. But I think it's important to flag examining historical barns in the township as part of a future goal and objective. But I think our workload right now is such that our priorities are more near term. Does that make sense? Is that,
Yeah.
I'm getting some consensus with that. The other piece is I recall, and this was in, I think some correspondence either in the last couple of council meetings, and forgive me that they blended together a bit, but I thought there was a historical barn association in Ontario.
There is, yeah.
Maybe a recommendation for staff to reach out to them and see if we can maybe at the staff level connect with that association and understand what supports maybe exist within their association. I don't know what those are, but maybe reach out to them. That might be some good resources.
Just agree
Yeah,
with
go
you.
ahead. Lily.
But what you said was not, maybe we don't go back to the properties, but now as we're looking at these, perhaps knowing a bit more, we can just include any other buildings instead of just the one building. Just so we don't have to go back again later, like, actually the Weiner House is one that I would revisit. Because it has the cedar log cabin, it has the stone house. And then it has at least another similar, it's built at the same time as the stone house, so it's like a chop house or something.
Okay.
I don't know that all three of those buildings were there, but if I was to do it today, I would make sure I covered all three, just so it's all in there.
Does that make sense? I think that's a good evolution.
Yeah.
Sure.
My question is probably to Justine, if you mentioned the barn above, in the, like above the attributes at the end, does that count or doesn't count? Cause
Through
there's
the chair.
some. And I mentioned the barn, but I don't think I mentioned it down at the bottom.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if it's included in the section above, it is not designated. That is just providing part of the context for the property. For something to be protected, it has to be listed under that attribute section, and the attributes that you're protecting have to be included.
Does that answer your question, Cheryl?
Yeah, because I had another property where, Andy and I had that we talked about the log house but we noted that the barn was mentioned through the Historical Society as having significance. But I don't think I brought that down to the bottom.
So I think this is good context. So moving forward on the properties that are still working through the process that we have in the queue for 2025 and 20 beyond. I think if there is a barn of historically significance, I think we've got a reasonable path forward as to how to note the attributes and maybe look for some guidance through the Historical Barn Association, if I'm getting that right. And I'll maybe leave it with staff to maybe update us at a future meeting. Is that fair? Or even just search offline.
Through you, Mr. Chair, would it potentially be beneficial to reach out to them and see if they may be interested in presenting a delegation to the committee?
Love it. I think that's a great idea, even if, I'm not sure where they're based out of, but even if it's a virtual presentation at a future meeting. I'm not sure if anybody disagrees with that, but I think it would be value. I think if we go back, we live in a rural community. And there's a number of beautiful old heritage barns, and I would hate to see them destroyed. So I think that's a fantastic idea, Justine.
Ontario Barn Preservation.
That's what I was wondering.
We have some good local folks who are working on that. Yeah, Hugh Fraser is doing some work with the University of Guelph.
Okay. Well, that's good. I'm gonna attempt to give you a few minutes to narrow down our recommendations as part of this conversation. This is good, though. I think this is we're learning as we go through this process, right? I think it's no different than any other community. We've just had a lot of heritage properties that we've tackled, and you know, the unique wrinkle is we do live in a rural community, so there's some things that we're learning. Yeah,
Okay.
tell me what you got.
Okay, so
and I'll-
the resolution I have, is that report HER 2025 entitled 2022 to 2026 Goals and Objectives Update be received for information. And that staff register 2 Heritage Advisory Committee members for the Ontario Heritage Conference. And that staff reach out to the Ontario Barn Preservation to delegate at a future Heritage Advisory Committee meeting regarding the designation of barns in the township. Is that what we want?
Regarding the process to designate barns.
Okay, staff reach out to the Ontario Barn Preservation to delegate at a future Heritage Advisory Committee meeting regarding the process of designation of barns in the township.
And can I add a third one? Is that we add to the future goals and objectives that those properties that have already completed designation be reviewed after at a point in the future for potential barns. But
Other outbuildings.
yeah, other outbuildings is maybe a better way of saying that.
Yeah, just in case there's something that's.
After we've, like, that's the last one in the bottom of our future work plan. So realistically, it's not gonna be a 22 to 26 goals. It'll be but I don't wanna lose the direction. Yeah. I think it's. I'll leave it to words.
This is gonna happen this term of the committee. Okay,
Wow.
okay.
Are you sure though? Because one of us do. Go back and look at it. There's market aerial views and real estate listings.
Maybe, I think
I
I'm
wouldn't eliminate it.
I'm more focused on like, let's get the properties we have in the queue done. Not get distracted with redoing ones that we've already done, but I'm also sensitive. Start of this term of this committee, we didn't really have a lot of carryover goals. We kind of started from
Right.
scratch, right? And,
Yeah.
and philosophically, from my standpoint, at the end of this term of council in 2026, I would love to be able to provide a list of potential goals and objectives for 2026 through 2030 for the next iteration of Heritage Committee. I sincerely hope all of you are on that committee and myself, but you never know what happens in the future. But I think that gives that committee at least a list of ideas that have been strategically flagged, and then it's up to them to choose whether they want to pursue it. Is my take on it. Thoughts? Go ahead.
There's someone that, I'm not sure that our township or anyone there, might have a procedure in place for what if we observe demolition by neglect happening? What sort of things can we do? There's property right now.
Demolition by neglect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or Justine.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
through-
Justine.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the township does have a property standards bylaw. So, and maybe to clarify, is this question related to properties that are designated, or this is for properties that are not designated?
In theory, it could be either. I think, well, for us, most of the properties are in some state of getting designated, so I guess it would be not quite designated status, but they could be. What if the homeowner loses their property? What if, like, it's not that they intentionally let the house degrade, or what if it's a builder? And those are both happening in our township right now, where a builder wants that building gone, so they leave the windows open and they don't do anything with it. Both
Yeah,
those
so-
cases,
Through you,
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Chair, we do have a property standards bylaw, so if there are concerns related to property standards for specific properties, a bylaw complaint form can be completed, and then that will enable staff to investigate. So the property standards bylaw speaks kind of generally to properties, but then also does have a section related to properties that are designated as well.
just the bylaw standards.
Is that something, Justine, I'm just kind of thinking out loud here. Would that be something staff could send out after the meeting just to the committee as an FYI of like, here's the bylaw number, here's the components of it, to maybe answer Lily's question? Because I realize we're getting into some pretty technical jurisdiction here that's maybe not. It's not an easy navigation at the committee level, but I think if we advise offline and then prior to the next committee meeting, which is in May, so basically in 8 weeks, if there's inconsistencies or within that bylaw that are unclear, we could maybe raise it for discussion at a future meeting. With respect to heritage designation, if there's a particular building, either, I guess I look at it as three components. One is if there's a building in a heritage property that's neglect, that's one thing. If there's a building in a property that's going through the heritage designation process, that's the second piece. It's currently in neglect. And the third kind of bucket would be just a property that is in neither of those first two, that's just perceived to be in neglect and what can be done there. And my thinking is like, this is pretty technical, and this is an advisory committee. Not sure we want to get into the intricacies of bylaw language, but it might be something we can just drive to an offline conversation. And if it comes back and it triggers a number of questions, and let's bring it back at the next committee meeting for, and at that point, if it is unclear for whatever reason from a historical aspect, we can make some recommendations that staff can bring forward for a potential bylaw amendment for council to digest at a point in the future. Is that a reasonable path forward, Justine?
Through Mr. Chair, we can certainly share the bylaw. It is published on our township website, so it is available to the public. So we can certainly share a link to our bylaw page. Our bylaws are reviewed typically on a 5-year schedule. So if there are suggested amendments to the bylaw, we would just take those in. And then when the bylaw is up for review, we'd bring them to council at that point.
That's good. And the role of this committee is to make recommendations. So if it's deemed that it's desirable to make a recommendation at the future, we can do it, and it gets put in the work queue. That seem acceptable?
Yeah, we'll take it offline for sure. Thank you.
Okay. Just keep adding to your list here. So do you want to take one more crack at it? And we'll-
So I have that the report is received for information that staff registered 2 committee members for the conference. That staff reach out to the Ontario Barn Preservation to delegate at a future committee meeting regarding the process of designating barns in the township. And that the designation of barns be included in the 2026 to 2030 Heritage Advisory Committee work plan.
Yes.
Justine's typing.
Where
Do you want to update that, Justine? What do you like or what do you
Yeah,
dislike?
can we just tweak the wording for the last bit that the designation of barns be included as a proposed goal or objective for the 2026-2030 Heritage Advisory Committee work plan, because a goal and objective proposal will have to be completed at that point in time. So just marking that we're adding it under that kind of proposed list, as a placeholder.
we just add barns and other structures, like not specifically barns possibly?
Be barns and outbuildings.
I wouldn't put outbuildings, I would put the buildings just because like we know one is an actual residence.
Okay, yep, other structures, maybe it's
Mhm.
high low. Okay,
That barns and other structures be included. Mhm.
and then do we want to capture in this the demolition by neglect component, or is that just staff direction to
Mhm.
submit
I can
that?
send that, yeah.
Okay, well done. That was a slog to get
Do
through.
we need someone to first that?
All right, got Lily, second. All right, thanks, Cheryl. All in support of the direction? All right, carried. Okay, thank you for that. That was a bit of a sidebar, but okay. 8.2, committee memo 2025-001, Kilkenny Bell, the school monument. Laura.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, this is a committee memo as well as the goals and objectives proposal form that should the committee support, we will prepare for council. And it relates to the Killeen School Bell section monument unveiling. Lily and Cheryl drafted both the proposal form and the committee memo. And I guess if you have anything to add, please add it, but the committee memo and the proposal form is kind of twofold. One aspect is having a booth at the Westland Community Showcase in the fall. And then the other side of that is to have a permanent display of information relating to this 12 school sections hung at the community center.
Comments, questions? Cheryl?
I would like to know the exact date of the,
It's the first Saturday of October, so I believe it's October 3rd or 4th. 4th.
thank you.
Yeah, so the showcase will be October 4th. And then the other piece of that is related to the display. The committee, like there isn't a budget line item for the permanent display in the committee's budget. Since that was like finalized like last September, I want to say, it's always so early in advance in the calendar year. With that being said, staff did connect with our director of finance on kind of like the process for including something in the budget related to this. And we would just have to make sure we don't, however much it ends up being, that's why we need that, we need to know how much it is, and then we would just take that out of the professional development budget, some other budget line item that we, so we make sure we don't go over, and then include that in the report that goes to council as well.
Do you need that before?
We would need it
this
before
goes?
it goes to council, yeah, just so we know, we can tell council how much.
So we'll get some quotes.
Mhm.
We'll use your printer and we'll see, we'll just find out how much generally it is. But I suspect there's enough in the Bell Monument. Can it be part of that if there is? Or does it have to be separate?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, the reason it has to be separate is because the Killeen School Bell comes with a Parkland dedication fee,
Okay.
so it's,
Yeah.
yeah.
We'll proceed as discussed.
Mhm.
Good. Other questions any committee members have? Just my only comment when I read through it is I thought 200 was maybe light. My mind was like 500 type of thing,
If
but
we could get an upset limit of what the committee would be willing to spend on it, I think that would be beneficial for.
Well, why don't we get some, we still have a bit of time, so why don't Cheryl and I get a couple of quotes for, we're talking to match the poster that's already, there's a poster size that's bigger than these, isn't it? Not as big as this, but it's just,
2 feet by 3 feet.
something like that, and it's just on, mounted, so it's not like a big frame or anything, it doesn't have to be matted. So it's on the cheaper side of mounting, but we'll get, I don't know what they cost now.
I guess on a comment on this topic, I talked with Laura, about writing an article in the Pioneer about the bell, what we're doing with it.
I think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, good, because I said it was.
We
That's why I
concur.
wanted to make sure I had the date right.
Mhm.
It's the unveiling.
Okay.
And I don't think it's in our minutes yet that Kevin Whitcomb would be willing to participate in that unveiling of the bell.
Can I just add that, since it's at the end, the bell was actually close to my place, so I took a look at the bell and met Kevin. And he actually was a student, one of the last students at Killeen. So it's quite interesting to have that kind of, what's the word, circular kind of path to the process.
That's fantastic. I think that's all. That's great. You have enough photos for the article in the Pioneer, or do we need?
Lily took some when she was there at the bell, so,
Doesn't have its, what's the thing called again, the table thing?
Yes, it doesn't make noise, I believe.
It does not, but that's probably okay.
Probably a good thing. Okay.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So kind of the next steps on this is that staff will kind of now write a report to council proposing that this be added to the goals and objective work plan. And in that, we just want to make sure that we include how much is the frame display is going to be. But I think it would be good to capture in the minutes that the committee is willing to agree to transfer an upset of, if you think it could be $500, then great. From their from your guys' professional development to this, just so that we know. Or else we wouldn't be able to talk about that till the May meeting. But I think that could be good direction to have that before we report to council.
Maybe just one question on the professional development. If we send 2 individuals to the Ontario Heritage Conference, does that deplete our professional development budget to a point where we can't move beyond $200?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it would probably mean if you're gonna use the professional development account. Let's choose. It would probably be around $600 to $700. Assuming it goes up in price from last year, which I assume it will. But yeah, sorry, Lily.
I'm just wondering if we could find, if council could find somewhere else to take that out of perhaps something towards the 175th of Post Lunch Township, so it's not the committees at all. Because this is going to go up, it's going to be part of the celebration from the 175th.
Could we offer $250 and ask that they match it from somewhere else?
We could fundraise if we have to, so
Yeah,
maybe we should
and we
just see
could- and we
if
could-
it's.
You could do that.
Right, Justine, I see your hands up.
Yeah,
Just
through
really-
you, Mr. Chair. So the committee has a couple options. So when you're drafting the proposal to council, you can include that a portion, you would fundraise for a portion of it, and you could identify which portion. With that being said, I believe there is also an office supply section of the Heritage Advisory Committee's budget. I can't recall what the amount is. But I think between the office supply and the 500 from professional development, there would probably be enough for the poster. And given the committee isn't intending to attend the National Trust Conference, I think between that move of professional development and the office supply section, there would be enough to cover the poster, as long as it doesn't exceed, the $500.
Okay, great. That was my question. Can we pull from 2 budget line items? Through you, Mr. Chair, the office supplies is $100. And I don't believe in the past year or so, the committee has tapped into that budget, so.
Did it stay? So there's
Correct. We still have
$300?
$100,
Oh, it's just total
but just-
100, okay.
Like past experiences of this committee is, it hasn't gone used, so we probably are able to tap into that.
So do you need a motion to agree to 500? Probably
So,
should share it myself.
Maybe let Laura just capture this and then we can, look for the motion to get discussed.
SSCD.
the resolution I have right now is that the committee memo, MEMO twenty twenty-five 001 entitled Colleen School Bell School Section Monument Unveiling be received, and that staff prepare a report for council's consideration to include the Colleen Bell School Section Monument Unveiling goal and objective to the twenty twenty-five Heritage Advisory Committee goal and objectives work plan, and that the committee agree that staff transfer an upset of $500 from the committee's professional development and office supplies budget to fund the permanent display. Is transfer a weird word?
No.
Okay, I don't know if that's too.
Allocate would be the other.
Oh, yeah.
I would say that.
Redirect.
Thank you, good one.
Mhm.
Okay, so just based on what Laura had said, paraphrasing, $500 upper limit to support the plaque. If we can come in less than that, fantastic. And it can be funded through the two accounts that were noted. So can we have a,
Yeah, I was gonna say, do I need to move that
Yes.
then? Okay, so moved.
Dean, we got a seconder? Andy, all right, thank you. Leave me hanging out here. All in support? All right, carried. Okay, that's good. Well written. Thank you to both of you for doing that. I think I'm excited to see this actually come to fruition, so. Yeah, exciting times, October 4th. Mark your calendars.
Just did, yeah.
Okay.
That's not me next.
Nope. So item number 9, correspondence. Do we have any additional correspondence, Laura?
The newsletter that's part of the summer correspondence.
Or just?
Yeah, you added it to the.
Yeah.
That was in consent.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Good. Announcements, item number 10, do we have any announcements at all? Any updates that anybody cares to share, in regards to Heritage?
Do we
Go
have
ahead,
a
Chair.
update, Laura, on the Bell, carpentry part?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, I guess the update is now that staff are kind of working with the contractor on finalizing who we're using for the carpet, the contractor we're using has been away for the last week or so, so I'm trying to connect with him this week on his updates for, the carpenter, because I do know that he received a couple of quotes. And those came in, under budget of what we were hoping for, so I think we will be good to go and start working on that, yeah.
Can we request that be a agenda item at our May meeting? It's just for you to provide us a status update.
That makes sense, because you guys wanted any sort of things going on with the Clean School Bell to come back to the committee for information, and I just didn't include it in this agenda because it was tight from the budget meeting.
And I'm not sure, it's not a decision item per se. I think it's just that the committee's worked enough with this over the years. I think it's just a good opportunity for staff to provide an update. Okay, anything else in terms of announcements, folks? Great, item number 11, notice of motion. Does anybody have one they'd like to make? All right, moving on. Number 12, new business. Beyond any announcements, do we have any new business that anybody'd like to flag? Okay, hearing none. Last but not least, can we get a motion to adjourn the meeting?
That the Heritage Advisory Committee hereby adjourns at 1:58 PM.
Andy, thank you, seconder.
I'll second that.
All right, all in support? Carried. All right, thanks.